Have you ever wondered which books were considered so dark and frightening that they were banned from the Bible? Today, we're going to dive into apocalyptic texts filled with terrifying visions, fallen angels, eternal punishments, and hidden mysteries. Get ready to discover stories that even challenged the greatest theologians and were kept out of the official canon. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment on what you think about these forbidden books. And of course, stick around until the end, because you'll be surprised by what's coming. The Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch is a fascinating and terrifying work that had a great influence on the religious thought of ancient Judaism and early Christianity, but was ultimately rejected by the councils that defined the biblical canon. Attributed to Enoch, Noah's great-grandfather, it describes a series of prophetic visions, narrating supernatural events that occur before the flood. One of the most frightening aspects of the Book of Enoch is the account of the fall of the Watchers, a group of angels who descended to earth and, fascinated by human women, engaged in forbidden relations with them. From this union, the Nephilim were born, giants of an evil nature who corrupted humanity with violence and sin. These hybrid beings are described as having immense size and strength, causing chaos in the world. Enoch is then called by God to warn of the impending destruction of the world as punishment for this corruption. The book also details the punishment of the rebellious angels who are chained and await final judgment in deep darkness. The description of the fall of these beings, who were once divine, evokes an atmosphere of terror and loss, symbolizing the eternal struggle between good and evil. The narrative is filled with apocalyptic imagery, such as natural catastrophes, great floods, and divine purifications that would lead to a new beginning for humanity. Another reason the Book of Enoch was so controversial and terrifying is its detailed vision of cosmic mysteries. It offers a complex description of the spiritual universe, revealing secrets of the heavens, stars, and angels who govern the cosmos. These revelations were seen as too disturbing and esoteric for the general public, contributing to the decision to exclude the book from the Bible. The Apocalypse of Peter. The Apocalypse of Peter is one of the darkest and most disturbing texts that was banned from the biblical canon, containing terrifying descriptions of hell and the punishments reserved for sinners. Likely dating back to the 2nd century, this apocalyptic book was very popular among early Christians and deeply influenced medieval imagination about the afterlife, especially concerning visions of eternal torment for the wicked. The text narrates a vision that the Apostle Peter allegedly received from Jesus, where he is taken on a journey to hell. In this vision, Peter witnesses the punishments inflicted on different types of sinners, with specific and extremely graphic penalties for each sin committed on earth. For example, those who blaspheme are hung by their tongues, while adulterers are suspended by their flaming eyes. These detailed descriptions of torture made a great impact, instilling a deep fear of what awaited condemned souls. A particularly macabre detail of the Apocalypse of Peter is that it goes beyond merely listing sins and punishments. It also offers visual descriptions of the agony of the damned, making the reader feel the pain and suffering of each soul. The torments include unquenchable fire, worms that never die, and rivers of lava. In one especially frightening section, Peter sees women being tortured for aborting their children, with unborn babies crying out and condemning their mothers. This grotesque image of eternal punishment for certain sins sparked intense theological debate, as the level of brutality seemed to contradict the message of Jesus' mercy. Another fascinating aspect of the Apocalypse of Peter is the clear division between the fate of the righteous and the sinner. While hell is shown in agonizing detail, there are also visions of paradise, where the righteous enjoy peace, beauty, and divine rewards. This dichotomy reinforces the contrast between severe divine justice for the wicked and infinite grace for the faithful. However, the descriptions of hell were considered so shocking that the church eventually chose not to include the text in the New Testament. It's interesting to note that the Apocalypse of Peter had a strong influence on later depictions of hell, particularly in medieval literature. Works such as Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, written in the 14th century, echo the graphic descriptions of suffering in hell found in this apocryphal text. Peter's vision of the fate of sinful souls, however, was considered so violent and sensationalist that many church leaders feared it could foster an obsession with fear rather than salvation. Despite being excluded from the biblical canon, the Apocalypse of Peter remained influential in Christian communities for many centuries, shaping popular conceptions of hell and final judgment. The church chose to ban it, believing its images were too terrifying and inappropriate for Christian spirituality, which was meant to be based on hope and redemption. The Book of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees, also known as the Little Genesis, is filled with mysteries and elements that caused fear and astonishment, leading to its exclusion from the official biblical canon. Likely written in the 2nd century BCE, it offers a detailed chronology of the world, from creation to the time of Moses, dividing events into jubilees, 49-year cycles that represent sacred periods. This numerical focus, combined with a perspective of a universe filled with evil forces, made the text appear disturbing and dangerous to many religious leaders. One of the most frightening aspects of the Book of Jubilees is its interpretation of the origin of evil in the world. The text attributes much of humanity's corruption to the influence of fallen angels, figures already known in other apocryphal books, like the Book of Enoch. These angels, led by a being named Mastema, seen as an early version of Satan, corrupt humanity by mingling with mortal women and producing a race of giant beings known as the Nephilim. These monstrous beings, with their violence and depravity, are responsible for spreading evil throughout the world, leading to the flood. Mastema's role in the Book of Jubilees is especially unsettling. He appears as a dark figure who acts as an accuser and seeks in every way to harm God's chosen people. In a narrative similar to that of the Book of Job, Mastema asks God for permission to test and tempt the faithful, but his intentions are always malevolent, and he is not merely a tempter. He is a force that actively desires destruction and chaos on earth. His actions, from provoking wars to encouraging idolatry, portray a being that embodies evil in its purest form. Another dark element in the Book of Jubilees is the idea that original sin and the inclination toward evil are inescapable. Through the fallen angels and their evil offspring, the text suggests that evil is a force that has always been present in the world, corrupting humanity and making the cycle of destruction and divine punishment inevitable. This view, which differs from the concept of universal redemption presented in other scriptures, contributed to the book being considered heretical and dangerous. The flood is portrayed even more terrifyingly in the Book of Jubilees than in the canonical Genesis. It is not merely a consequence of human sin, but a deliberate attempt by God to cleanse the earth of the presence of the Nephilim and other abominations created by the fallen angels. However, the text suggests that even this great purification was not entirely effective. After the flood, some of these evil forces survived and continued to influence humanity, spreading wickedness across the world. The notion that evil is persistent and impossible to completely eradicate paints a grim and hopeless view of the future, which contributed to the book's exclusion from the Bible. Additionally, the Book of Jubilees presents a strict and inflexible view of the law of Moses. It emphasizes the importance of rituals and legal observances in a way that seems frighteningly punitive. Transgressing divine laws is met with unrelenting severity, and the idea of imminent divine punishment permeates the text. Punishment for disobedience is inevitable, occurring in a cycle of destruction, repentance, and further destruction, creating an environment of constant fear and anxiety. The exclusion of the Book of Jubilees from the canon was, in part, an attempt to protect Jewish and Christian spirituality from this terrifying view of the universe, where evil seems omnipresent and salvation is difficult to attain. Despite its exclusion, the book remained highly influential, especially among the Essene Jews of Qumran, who regarded the text as an important divine revelation and included it among the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Gospel of Thomas. The Gospel of Thomas is one of the most enigmatic and mystical works associated with early Christianity. Unlike the canonical Gospels, which narrate the life and teachings of Jesus in a narrative form, the Gospel of Thomas is a collection of 114 sayings, or logia, attributed to Jesus, many of which offer an esoteric and secret view of spiritual reality. This Gospel, supposedly written by Thomas the twin, Didymus, one of Jesus' disciples, was excluded from the biblical canon due to its deeply mysterious and cryptic content, addressing themes that could be considered frightening or heretical to Orthodox Christianity. The Gospel of Thomas does not offer stories of Jesus' miracles or historical events. Instead, it focuses on secret teachings about the kingdom of God, many of which suggest a hidden reality beyond common perception. What makes this gospel unsettling or disturbing for many is its emphasis on a concealed spiritual knowledge, known as gnosis, which is deemed necessary for true salvation. Unlike the canonical Gospels, where faith and deeds are often seen as the paths to salvation, the Gospel of Thomas implies that only those who possess this secret knowledge can escape the cycle of death and rebirth, elevating themselves to true eternal life. One of the most cryptic sayings in the Gospel of Thomas is the phrase, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." This statement suggests that salvation depends on an inner revelation, an awakening of dormant spiritual knowledge. The mysterious nature of this assertion, and many other sayings in the Gospel, sparked controversy among early church leaders, who feared that emphasizing secret knowledge could foster divisions and lead to the rise of Gnostic heresies. The Gospel of Thomas' view on the body and spirit was also deeply troubling for Christian orthodoxy. While the canonical Gospels often treat the physical resurrection of Jesus as central to the faith, the Gospel of Thomas seems to minimize the importance of the physical body. In several sayings, there is a focus on the liberation of the spirit from the prison of the material body, which aligns closely with Gnostic doctrines that viewed the physical world as corrupt or illusory. This view of the body as a prison for the spirit, fear and rejection from the Church, which saw the doctrine of bodily resurrection as a core promise of hope and renewal. Moreover, the Gospel of Thomas contains statements that, at first glance, seem to contradict traditional teachings of Jesus. For example, in one of its most controversial sayings, Jesus says, "I will destroy this house, and no one will be able to rebuild it." This statement can be interpreted in various ways, but many feared it suggested a radical rejection of religious institutions and the social order of the time, fueling revolutionary or sectarian movements. The idea of destruction, both literal and spiritual, permeates several of the Gospel's sayings, provoking discomfort and fear. Another reason for the exclusion of the Gospel of Thomas from the biblical canon is its apparent rejection of religious hierarchies and power structures. By focusing on spiritual knowledge that is directly accessible to individuals, the Gospel challenged the authority of religious institutions that claim to mediate between God and humanity. This idea that the kingdom of God is within you and all around you resonated deeply with Gnostic thought, but was also seen as a threat to the established order. By promoting a direct and personal relationship with the divine, without the need for priests or religious authorities, the Gospel of Thomas represented a challenge to the emerging church's power structure. Additionally, the Gospel of Thomas ends with a particularly controversial saying where Jesus tells Mary Magdalene that she must become male, to enter the kingdom of heaven. This statement has been widely debated, with interpretations ranging from a metaphor for transcending worldly gender distinctions to a reflection of esoteric spiritual views on human nature. However, this passage was seen as potentially subversive and unsettling, contributing to its rejection by ecclesiastical authorities. While the Gospel of Thomas was widely rejected by church councils, it was highly valued by some Christian communities, especially those inclined toward Gnosticism. Discovered in the Nag Hammadi library alongside other Gnostic texts in the 20th century, the Gospel revealed how diverse the understanding of Jesus' teachings was in the early centuries of Christianity. Its exclusion from the canon reflects an attempt to control the narrative of who Jesus was and what his teachings truly meant, discarding views that were considered too mystical, dangerous, or frightening. The Book of Wisdom of Solomon. The Book of Wisdom of Solomon, also known simply as Wisdom, is an apocryphal text that, while offering profound teachings on the nature of justice and divine wisdom, contains passages that evoke deep fear due to its dark view of the fate of the wicked. Traditionally attributed to King Solomon, the book was written around the 1st century BCE, likely by a Hellenized Jew in Alexandria, Egypt. Though recognized as part of the biblical canon by some Christian traditions, such as the Catholic and Orthodox churches, it was rejected by Protestant traditions during the Reformation. Its exclusion was partly due to its relentless portrayal of divine justice and the terrifying consequences awaiting those who stray from wisdom and God's path. The Book of Wisdom contains many reflections on the transience of human life and the inevitability of death, especially for those who do not follow divine justice. In chapter 2, for example, it describes the worldview of the wicked, who see life as fleeting and without purpose, believing that death is the end of everything. To them, life is an opportunity for momentary pleasures, as there is nothing better than living life to the fullest, a concept that leads to a sense of existential emptiness and despair. The text condemns this hedonistic perspective, warning that the wicked, by indulging in such a life, are sealing their fate of eternal destruction. One of the most frightening aspects of the Book of Wisdom is how it describes divine retribution. The book draws a sharp contrast between the righteous, who are protected and rewarded by God, and the wicked, who face not only physical death, but also spiritual torment. It suggests that the wicked, after death, will be condemned to a state of eternal anguish and despair. In Wisdom 5:14-15, the grim vision of the fate of the wicked is intensified. Like straw carried by the wind, like light foam dispersed by the storm, like smoke blown by the wind, like the memory of a guest who stays but a day. This fate evokes a sense of insignificance and complete dissolution, making it clear that divine justice is severe, and that those who turn away from wisdom are quickly forgotten. The book also explores the concept of the fear that torments the wicked, particularly in chapter 17, which details the punishment of the Egyptians during the plagues described in Exodus. The text speaks of an overwhelming terror that grips them as they are enveloped in dense darkness. The description of this darkness is almost tangible, with people unable to see the light, trapped in a darkness so thick that they cannot even discern shadows. These accounts of psychological terror are presented as the inevitable fate of those who rebel against God. The idea of being consumed by eternal darkness with no hope of redemption offers a chilling and grim image of the spiritual destiny of the wicked. Another powerful and disturbing passage in the Book of Wisdom is the description of the wicked being judged after death. They are depicted in a state of shock and panic as they realize their materialistic and hedonistic view of life was wrong. In chapter 5, the wicked lament as they see the righteous being rewarded, while they themselves are condemned. These are the ones we once held in derision, mocking their faithfulness, and now we see they are counted among the children of God. The terror of the final judgment is heightened by the awareness that the wicked lived a lie and now face an irreversible fate with their condemnation guaranteed. Moreover, the Book of Wisdom presents a frightening theme related to human mortality and finitude. It speaks of the fragility of life and the inevitability of death, highlighting how the wicked are paralyzed by fear when confronted with the reality of death. Unlike the righteous who have hope in eternal life, the wicked lie tormented by the realization that their existence is finite and devoid of lasting meaning. This vision not only provokes fear of physical death, but also the dread of eternal judgment hanging over them. For ancient readers, the Book of Wisdom of Solomon could have been seen as a solemn and terrifying warning about divine justice. Its exclusion from the Protestant canon, especially during the Reformation, was also due to its emphasis on the concept of pre-existing wisdom, which was viewed as personified and even deified, a notion that resonated with Hellenistic philosophical beliefs. This idea of an almost divine wisdom, which predates creation and is responsible for judging the wicked, could have been considered dangerous or heretical by some reformers. The vision of a cosmic, relentless divine power that judges harshly contributed to the discomfort with the book, as the Protestant Church placed more emphasis on grace than on implacable judgment. The Book of Wisdom of Solomon, with its frightening descriptions of the final fate of the wicked, its focus on the terror of darkness, judgment, and eternal dissolution, offers a view of divine justice that evokes fear and reverence. While valued in some Christian traditions, its exclusion by others reflects discomfort with its severity, which differs from the more redemptive tone found in other biblical texts. The Book of Esdras, 4 Esdras. The Book of Esdras, also known as 4 Esdras or 2 Esdras in Christian traditions, is one of the most fascinating and dark apocalyptic works excluded from the biblical canon. Likely written toward the end of the 1st century CE, this book reflects the anxieties and despair of a people who had endured great catastrophes, including the destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem in 70 CE. This atmosphere of loss and mourning permeates the text, filled with apocalyptic visions and deep philosophical discussions on suffering, final judgment, and the fate of souls. 4 Esdras was considered disturbing and frightening for many reasons, and its exclusion from the official canon was both doctrinal and due to its emotional impact. At the heart of 4 Esdras are the visions of the prophet Ezra, who seeks to understand why God allows suffering and the destruction of his people. Throughout the text, Ezra questions God, challenging the traditional understanding of divine justice. He asks why the righteous suffer while the wicked prosper, and why God's chosen people, the Israelites, have been subjected to such calamity. These questions reflect an existential and theological anguish that resonated deeply during a time of great uncertainty, but also caused discomfort for religious authorities who preferred a more triumphant and less questioning narrative of God's justice. One of the darkest visions in 4 Esdras occurs when Ezra is taken in spirit to witness the final fate of humanity. He sees scenes of mass destruction and the end of the world as we know it, with great natural cataclysms and spiritual battles between the forces of good and evil. In a particularly disturbing passage, Ezra witnesses an immense sea of fire consuming everything in its path, an image reminiscent of later descriptions of final judgment and hell. This apocalyptic vision is filled with terror and despair, with the implied message that divine judgment is inevitable and unstoppable. Another terrifying aspect of 4 Esdras is its emphasis on predestination, and the idea that only a very small number of people will be saved in the end. In one of the book's most iconic visions, Ezra sees a vast field where thousands of people are gathered, but only a small group is separated to be saved. The angel accompanying him explains that just as gold is refined by fire, only those who are pure and righteous can enter God's kingdom, while the vast majority of humanity will be condemned to destruction. This vision creates a sense of despair, suggesting that the fate of souls is already sealed, and the path to salvation is so narrow that only a few will successfully walk it. This concept was deeply unsettling to early Christian readers, as it contrasted sharply with the message of hope and redemption being promoted by the early church. Additionally, 4 Esdras introduces a frightening view of the afterlife. The book describes the judgment of souls, where the righteous are rewarded with eternal peace, but the wicked are condemned to a state of eternal torment. The description of these torments is as graphic as it is disturbing. In one vision, Ezra sees sinners being tormented by evil spirits, unable to find rest, while the souls of the righteous are embraced by angels in a place of light and joy. The idea of a clear and irreversible separation between the fates of the righteous and the wicked reinforces the fear of eternal damnation and amplifies the tension between the desire for salvation and the fear of spiritual failure. One of the most intriguing and frightening aspects of 4 Esdras is its vision of the future Messiah. Unlike the peaceful Messiah described in other texts, the Messiah in 4 Esdras is a warrior figure who leads a final battle against the nations hostile to Israel. This messianic vision, full of violence and destruction, presents the Messiah as an agent of vengeance and judgment. He does not come to bring peace, but to destroy the enemies of God and establish a kingdom where only the righteous will survive. This belligerent and merciless messianic figure heightened the tension around what it truly meant to be on the right side in the end times. For many, this shocking representation of the Messiah was unacceptable and may have contributed to the book's exclusion from the official canon. Another chilling element that reinforces the feeling of powerlessness in 4 Esdras is its treatment of time and the vastness of the universe. In his conversations with the angel Uriel, Ezra is made to understand that human time is insignificant compared to cosmic time, and that divine justice operates on a scale beyond mortal comprehension. This idea that humans have no control over their own fate, and that everything is predestined within a divine plan they cannot understand or alter, reinforces a sense of smallness and existential vulnerability. The book also presents a deep lament over the transience of human life. Ezra questions why human beings are created only to perish, echoing in anguish felt by many after the destruction of Jerusalem. He cries out for answers about why God creates humanity if the end is always death and destruction. These philosophical and theological questions, while profound and honest, were seen as too challenging for the average Christian and Jewish audiences, contributing to 4 Esdras being excluded from the Bible. Despite its exclusion from the biblical canon, 4 Esdras continued to be widely read in various Christian communities and profoundly influenced later apocalyptic literature. The work had a significant impact on medieval theology about final judgment, the apocalypse, and eternal damnation, shaping the popular vision of a stern and just God who would irrevocably reward the faithful and punish the wicked. 4 Esdras remains a powerful and frightening work that addresses suffering, justice, and the fate of the soul with emotional and philosophical intensity rarely found in other biblical texts. Its exclusion from the canon may have been an effort to soften its harsh messages and place more emphasis on hope, but its apocalyptic and dark visions continued to resonate deeply in the religious imagination for centuries to come. The Apocalypse of Paul. The Apocalypse of Paul, also known as the Pauline Apocalypse, is one of the most intense and visually disturbing apocryphal works, detailing the soul's journey through the realms of heaven and hell. Written in the 2nd or 3rd century, this text was widely read in the early centuries of Christianity, but was ultimately excluded from the official biblical canon due to its graphic and almost sensationalist depictions of the torments awaiting sinners in the afterlife. The narrative follows a structure similar to other ancient apocalypses, like the Apocalypse of Peter, but Paul's version takes the concept of punishment and reward to extreme levels, inspiring both fear and awe among its readers. The text begins with Paul being taken up into heaven in a visionary experience, where he is guided by an angel through various celestial and infernal spheres. However, unlike more optimistic and glorious visions of the righteous in heaven, the apocalypse of Paul focuses heavily on the horrifying punishments awaiting the wicked in hell. Paul witnesses a vast array of torments, each meticulously designed to reflect the sins committed during life. One of the most terrifying aspects of this apocalypse is how hell is portrayed as a relentless machine of suffering, where each soul is forced to relive its failures and sins in an amplified and eternal manner. Among the most disturbing scenes, Paul sees souls immersed in lakes of fire, with worms endlessly devouring their bodies, an image echoing biblical descriptions of eternal punishment, but with a rawness that few other texts dared to explore. There are also souls suspended over dark abysses, tormented by demons with instruments of torture, where even the slightest movement increases their pain. These shocking images were considered too explicit by many religious leaders of the time, who feared that such vivid detail might alienate believers, fostering excessive fear rather than encouraging the pursuit of redemption. The Apocalypse of Paul also introduces an almost bureaucratic organization of hell, where fallen angels and demons have specific roles in administering torture. Each sin is uniquely punished, and the precision with which these torments are described suggests a preoccupation with detailing the consequences of every moral failure. For example, fornicators are burned endlessly with fire and brimstone. Liars are hung by their tongues from sharp hooks, and thieves are forced to carry unbearable weights representing their acts of theft. This personalization of punishment, where the torment reflects the sin itself, brought a terrifyingly realistic dimension to the notion of hell, intensifying the fear of just and implacable retribution. One particularly notable and disturbing scene in the Apocalypse of Paul is the vision of tyrants and unjust rich people being devoured by giant worms, which consume their flesh repeatedly, only for their bodies to be restored so the torment can begin anew. This specific description has been interpreted as social criticism, condemning those who abuse power and wealth to oppress the poor and innocent hell. The suffering of these souls is exacerbated by the fact that they can see the righteous in paradise enjoying a blessed existence, while they are torn apart by their own choices and actions. The image of worms as agents of eternal punishment carries deep symbolic resonance, linking physical decay to the spiritually degraded state of these souls. Another frightening aspect of the Apocalypse of Paul is the role of penitent souls, attempting to intercede for their loved ones on earth. Paul observes that the righteous in heaven have some degree of influence over the fate of sinners, able to petition God to lessen their punishments. However, these pleas are often denied, reinforcing the idea that the consequences of sin are severe and, in many cases, irreversible. This concept of immutable retribution heightened the fear among readers, as it implied that not even the prayers of the righteous could save those who had fallen too deeply into sin. The conclusion of the Apocalypse of Paul is equally bleak. As Paul is returned to earth and reflects on his vision, with the understanding that final judgment is inevitable and that the fate of souls is sealed according to their actions in life, this final message reinforces the idea that hell is a present reality and that unrepentant souls will face unimaginable torment, an idea that resonated deeply in the early centuries of Christianity, when fear of judgment was a central theme. The Apocalypse of Paul was eventually rejected from the official canon, not only because of its graphic descriptions of hell, but also due to its excessive focus on fear and punishment, which contrasted with the emerging doctrine of divine mercy and the possibility of redemption. Religious leaders worried that the text might foster an obsession with damnation and eternal suffering rather than inspire the pursuit of holiness and grace, leading to its exclusion. However, despite its exclusion from the canon, the Apocalypse of Paul continued to have a profound influence on later Christian literature. Its vivid and terrifying depictions of hell left an indelible mark, especially in medieval imagination, serving as a source of inspiration for works like Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy and other apocalyptic visions of the Middle Ages. Paul's vision of hell, with its meticulous descriptions of punishment and pain, remains one of the most terrifying portrayals of eternal condemnation, prompting reflection on the consequences of sin and the necessity of living a righteous life. Now that you've explored the most terrifying banned books of the Bible, it's clear how these apocryphal texts carry mysteries and disturbing revelations that could change our perception of the sacred. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Comment on what you thought of these stories, and if you'd like to learn more about other intriguing topics. There's much more content coming, so hit the bell icon to stay updated.